Good morning and welcome to Crack the Mic with Agent of Change, DeCorey Davis. And this week's segment is titled When Love is Killing You. And unfortunately, when something becomes hazardous for you, what you do is get out. Now, to be clear, I'm no divorce professional or an expert. However, I predicted and blogged about this very issue, that the divorce rates and filings would increase during the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, according to a survey from Legal Templates, COVID-19 increased tensions on marriages and negatively impacted many relationships. The online company reports a 34% increase in divorce agreements compared to the same period in 2019. In my view, my people were told to work from home and limit travel. Families were together more often than ever before. And from those with already struggling relationships, this likely increased tensions and made them realize they could be happier apart from one another. And to help me further this discussion, I have a guest, Lydia Meredith, author of The Gay Preacher Wife, How My Gay Husband Deconstructed My Life and Reconstructed My Faith. Ms. Meredith is also an ordained minister, civic leader, LGBTQ activist, and founder, and previously managed Beacon of Hope Renaissance Learning Center that was a recipient of $1.5 million annually through grant writing and funding for disproportionately at-risk children, youth, and the families in the Metro Atlanta area. She's currently a doctoral candidate and professor of rhetoric at Georgia State University. She holds 3 master's degrees from Vanderbilt University, a degree from ITC, Morehouse School of Religion, and Georgia State University, where she currently serves as a professor. Tamika Brown is also back on the podcast this week for this segment. She's a graduate of Palm Beach Atlantic University, professional health mental therapist with telehealth therapy, holistic lady counseling service. So good morning, ladies. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Morning.
Okay. Now, research has found that most common reasons for people to give for their divorce are lack of commitment, too many arguments, infidelity, marrying too young, unrealistic expectations, lack of participation for marriage, preparation rather for marriage, and abuse. Also, research suggests the nature of love changes over time. Now, ladies, let's just delve into this conversation. And my first question for the panel is as follows. Amongst several reasons why marriages fail, these 5 reasons seems to be mental health issues. When one or both parties have mental health issues, it can lead to divorce, alcohol and substance abuse, financial issues, adultery. And my question for the panel now is as follows. Do you see any of the 5 listed as a reason why your marriage may have ended?
The reasons you've given are a lot of reasons that marriages could end. And I'm sure people give those reasons because they believe they are the reasons, but all those things do happen. But my belief is when there is no longer an emotional connection between two people, the marriage ends.
Absolutely. I can dig that. Tamika, you want to respond to the question?
I would agree with, I'll say Dr. Meredith. Um, I just
I'm
believe
not
that,
a doctor yet.
not
Ms.
yet, not
Brown,
yet.
not yet. I'm in a program to become that. And
Yes, I'm
I
saying it by
want,
faith.
yes, yes. And uh, I will use that language to inspire me
Amen.
to continue my studies. Thank you so much.
No problem. But I definitely would agree with her when the emotional connection has been severed, and you don't, you can love a person but not be in love with them. You can, be kind, cordial, all of those things, and not have the intimate connection that it takes for a marriage to work and to prosper. And so I would agree with her, though those are definitely valid reasons. They're not, they're not hard and fast, basically. And so I would agree that once the emotional connection has been severed, that's it. That's it.
Because I mean, people stay together in all kinds of conditions and
Yes.
situations,
Right.
and all kinds of arrangements that are in place where people stay together. And I mean, they're still there.
Right.
Right.
When that emotional piece is gone,
Hmm.
and either one party, and it only takes one party to
Right.
decide if they don't want to be there. If one decides they don't want to be there, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
that one party deciding they don't want to be there could be a host of reasons why that party doesn't want to be there anymore. But when they decide they don't want to be there, the emotional connection is gone.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask the second question to you guys, to you ladies, rather. What was the reason, or better yet, for you, Miss Meredith, what was the reason and motive behind writing your book, The Gay Preacher's Wife? What was the reason behind that book?
I wrote my book. It started out being for therapeutic reasons. I needed something to help me heal because my marriage ended, and it served that purpose, of course. And it was written so number one, it was for cleansing, helping me cleanse and purge. And sometimes when things are written, that's a way of healing. And that was a way for healing in my life. And secondly, that was the reason I wrote it. The reason it was published is a whole different reason.
Okay.
The reason the book is published is because I felt like I was not in isolation in what I experienced in my life. And when you're able to share your story to an audience, it doesn't matter, who the audience is. And you never know who could benefit from your story, because there's parts of your story that you never would assume that. And that's the kind of feedback I've gotten, from so many different people, how my story helped them and inspired them and motivated them and helped them and those kinds of things. And that's the reason why the project was published. And so a lot of times people want to keep secrets.
Absolutely.
But you can't keep a secret and be able to transform society and try to help people who are in relationships that are either healthy or unhealthy, and people seeing certain things different ways. Unless you are willing to open that conversation or have that conversation, nothing happens.
Right. That is true. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and move forward with the third question for the panel. Now, do you feel that great sex or the lack thereof could be a deal maker or a deal breaker?
You want to respond to that, Ms. Brown?
I was staying on mute so that you would respond.
Don't all answer at one time.
I don't want to do all the talking, and I've been, doing a lot of the talk, and I want to give Ms. Brown an opportunity to share her thoughts.
Well, that for some people, many people, that is definitely a deal breaker. If sex is not all, but it is a very important part in a relationship. Now, of course, there are times where there are medical reasons or certain issues that prevent a couple from engaging in the act. So that can happen. There are certain exceptions, but I do believe when you're actively, both people are healthy and need the marriage to work, want the marriage to work, then sex is going to be a part of that. And when one person now decides to disengage for whatever the reason, and if the reason is not being discussed, if it's not being actively worked on, if they're not, communicating not only with each other, but also not employing any interventions that will help to, bridge the gap and figure out, okay, what is going on? Is this just a libido issue? Is it just a, life balance issue? Is it something that we need to schedule? Is it something that, are there deep-seated issues there that we're not, discussing or uncovering to get us to that place where we can be intimate freely and enjoy it? So there are a plethora of reasons. I think when it comes to, being a deal breaker, that basically just depends on each, particular person. I'm of the belief that I believe in marriage. I believe in the institution in and of itself. I believe in the, what the inheritance piece, especially for, as the Bible says, for our children's children. I think it's important, especially in our Black community, to leave that legacy where as much as possible. Me personally, I've already been divorced. So, but I tried, I went as far as I could to try to make the marriage work, but you can't make a marriage work by yourself. And so, now that I'm in a new place, in a new marriage, it would definitely be an issue where if, one doesn't want it or whatever the reasons are, if it's not being dealt with, then at some point, but after, I believe in exhausting all options where as much as possible, just because I believe in the foundation and the institution of marriage. But ultimately, a decision would have to be made if this is going to be something that is long-term and we're not, medically sick or, anything in that realm. So it definitely can be.
Okay.
And I'll just follow by saying Ms. Brown is very on point with her thoughts. Sex, again, is something that people do differently. And so it starts, to me, it starts in the mind. And if you're not mentally there, something in the physical piece is not going to work. So in terms of, is sex a deal breaker? Is how you define it and what is sex to you. But I do believe that we are created to be sexual beings. We have sexual organs. We're built to be sexual. And so sexual beings is a part of our DNA. It was part of the way God made us. We were made
right.
that way. And so to fulfill that with our life partner or whoever the partner is, that's needed. That's part of your life's That's something that makes life complete. Now, if you were, some people are gifted not to need sex. I mean, you got people who are asexual,
Right.
and so I mean, life is so fluid, Corey. I mean, I have learned in my life that you can't label anything, you can't put people in a box, because people are so different, and their
Right.
needs, their hopes, dreams, desires, the way they're built, everything is so different. It's hard um, to just make a blanket statement and it works for everyone. But what I can say is that we are sexual beings. Even asexual people have a sexual preference, and that is asexual. So, so what works for you, is going to work for you. And what's
Right.
not going to work for you is not going to work for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I didn't hear either of you ladies say this here, and I think sexual compatibility is also
That's it. That's it.
that has to be at the forefront when we're talking about sex. A lot of people, because it's relative, what may
Yeah,
work for one person may not work for the other. Be as
exactly.
it may, if you guys are speaking the same love language, quote unquote, then I think it can be feasible and it can be great if you guys are on the same frequency. So now I want to just kind of go back to you, Mrs. Meredith, if I can. And I just love the book, by the way. And I want to ask, oh, absolutely. And I want to ask you now, did you know or suspect your husband was gay during the marriage?
I didn't know from the beginning.
Okay.
I didn't know before we got married. I found out after we got married. And after I found out, we had 3 sons. And they were in grade school, and I was emotionally connected.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
And so at that point of finding out didn't mean anything. Finding out was like Ms. Tamika said, well, how do we work together to solve this issue? How do we stay married? How do we love each other through this? How do we save our marriage? And if 2 persons are willing to do that and make the sacrifices that come with making a decision to save your marriage, then the marriage can be saved. Now, when 2 people are not in love enough to make those sacrifices so that both parties are emotionally connected in the relationship, then the relationship is over at that point. So when I found out, my ex-husband was very willing to go to counseling and do whatever we felt like we needed to do to stay together as a family, raise our sons, and continue in a marriage where we felt like we had made these vows and we wanted to honor those vows, and we still loved each other. But what happens is anything can change, and especially things can change when there is adultery, because when you are in relationship with someone else,
Mm-hmm.
and whether you're in sexual relationship, where you're taking those emotions other places, you can say it's just sex. Oh, this is just sex. Well, it's going to be just sex until you fall in love.
Oh, wow.
And so that just sex may happen for a while, but when it happens and you fall in love, then if you become in love with someone else, you're no longer in love with me.
Wow.
And so that's the breaking point at that point. You're no longer willing at that point to work to make the marriage work because you're in love with someone else.
Right. And the Bible says, well, and I'm no biblical scholar, but I think one of the reasons, and you ladies both are ordained ministers, so I know I'm in a good place right now. One of the good reasons.
I'm not ordained yet, but working on it.
Okay.
You're speaking so much. You're speaking so much into our lives, Mr. Davis. But you know what? We're gonna just own what you say about us, and because these are things we are expiring to be, and so you just go ahead and speak those things into our lives because these are things we aspire to be.
Absolutely. Okay, but the point I want to ask, or the question rather, I want to ask. Okay, so the Bible gives you one reason for divorce, and that is adultery, correct?
Well, if you want to take a literal translation of that, because you can experience adultery if somebody is unfaithful. If you define adultery as being unfaithful, there's a whole lot of ways that you can be unfaithful in a relationship.
Okay.
So if you're being unfaithful by having sex with another person, and you end up falling in love with that person and it ends your marriage, then adultery, in terms of being the cause biblically of ending your marriage, I would say, that is the cause. But if you define unfaithfulness and in a broader context,
Okay.
and beyond sex, is whatever an act of unfaithfulness, if you understand what I'm saying.
Wow.
If you define it as an act of unfaithfulness, a workaholic could be an adulterer.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
He's never there, or she's never there. Her attention is never there. Her emotion is never there. The family doesn't feel loved, connected. The person is absent, those kinds of things. And so what sex can bring, workaholism can bring. Different kinds of ways of being unfaithful. But what can happen, and what Jesus encouraged was in the New Testament, was that people would go beyond the law and go beyond definitions and go beyond these things and try to be humane and work together to honor the vows that you took. And if you are willing to honor the vows that you took, then divorce doesn't come up, because you made a vow before God that this is what you were going to do. I'm going to be faithful in this relationship. But faithful couldn't be have a broader meaning than just I'm going out having sex with somebody else and I happen to fall in love with whoever I'm having sex with. Well, that's one definition. But there's another way to think about it.
And I get the point, but that when you say the vows, until death do we part, I think that's more workable. You can work through issues like a workaholic or a person who may have just lost the spontaneity that he or she once had before and brought it to the table, and it's no longer there. Those are things that can be worked on and restored.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Bible, and just narrowing that context or the meaning of adultery, I think it just means a sexual affair with another person.
And I think it could mean that, but it could mean something else. Go ahead, Tamika. How would you respond to that?
It's funny because I'm as I'm listening, I'm reminded I had a conversation with my husband a few weeks ago or months ago, but long story short, we get into it because I feel very, very strongly against adultery, period. And he has a different, or he says, the definition that we place on fidelity is not what most people use the term loosely, but they're using it wrongly. And so I like what you said as far as being unfaithful, because you can be unfaithful, outside of the sexual element. What I was reminded of was pastors, for example, there are many pastors who are guilty of transposition, which is basically being married to the church, the married to church, as far as the ritual of church.
Amen, Ms. Brown. Excuse me for saying amen. Go ahead.
Oh, yes. They are married to church first, anything that, pertains to church. But what about home? And many neglect their homes. Many, their wives are crying out for attention, for affection, for, just to have a more balanced life. And aren't they unfaithful as well? So I do believe that it can encompass different scenarios. I do believe, as far as the sexual aspect of it, though I personally feel very, very strongly, like, it's, although it's happened to me already, I believe what it comes down to is those two people in that relationship making a decision for them, if this is something that is going to be, again, a deal breaker. Because really and truly, any area of unfaithfulness can truly be worked out. It basically comes down to the decision that those parties are going to make. Do you want to make it work? Now, I will say certain atrocities, certain breaches of trust, when they happen on certain levels, especially the sexual plane, financial and other realms, certain hurts, they go very, very deep and take more time to heal and process. And it does take a lot of work to forgive and to really get to a place where we can, though you'll never forget, to get to a place where you can say, okay, you know what, I forgive you, let's move forward. But that decision has to be made together. And I will say, just from a clinical standpoint, typically when any breach happens, when the man, even if the man is not at fault, but when the man, statistics basically show that when the man takes onus or responsibility in being at the forefront in repairing damage, even if he did not cause it, the trajectory for that marriage or relationship tends to fare much, much better. So that's just a little side note, but I would just say, people have different definitions of infidelity and unfaithfulness. But again, it comes down to that person and each couple to make a decision as far as, if they're going to make that push through and make it work.
Okay. Wow. That is astounding to hear those responses from ladies. But guess what? We will be concluding here. We want you to tune in to part 2 with our guests, Lydia Meredith and Tamika Brown. And again, this is your agent of change, DeCorey Davis, with Crack the Mic. You don't want to miss part 2 of When Love is Killing You. Peace. See you next week.